Martin, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us what you have this week.
Thanks, John. Have you ever wanted to expose your Drupal site's data as JSON using view modes, formatters, blocks, and more? There's a module for that. It's called Transform API, and it was created in September of 2023 by Lupus Gray, aka Martin Geising of Denmark. It has 1.0.0 beta 4 and 1.0.2 versions available, both of which work with Drupal 9 and 10. And it is actively maintained. In fact, the most recent commit was earlier today. It does also have security coverage. And as for documentation, it has both an in-depth README as well as a full user guide. It has 14 open issues, 3 of which are bugs, but none of them are against the current branch. And according to Drupal.org, it is officially in use by 2 sites. Now, after installing Transform API, you should be able to get the JSON for any entities on your site by adding the format equals JSON as a parameter to the URL. To get more fields exposed as JSON, you can also configure a transform mode using a field UI configuration very similar to view modes. You can also add transform blocks to globally include specific data in all transformed URLs in the same way that you would normally use blocks to show information on your entity pages. The output of transform blocks is also segmented into regions, as they will be provided in the JSON output. Now, where Drupal's standard engine produces render arrays that ultimately become HTML, Transform API replaces it with an engine that produces transform arrays that will ultimately become JSON. Where the standard JSON API output of Drupal more or less exposes all information as raw data for the front end to format, Transform API allows for more of the formatting to be managed on the back end, where it will use Drupal's standard caching mechanisms, permission-based access, and more. Transform API also supports lazy transformers, which are callbacks that will be used after caching but before the JSON response is sent. And you can also use alter hooks to manipulate the transform data. So let's talk about Transform API.
Yeah, this sounds like it might solve some of the issues we were talking about last week with Next.js. Like it might give you the ability to kind of manipulate the data a little bit more before it goes out. I'm curious if how it handles like images, for example, if you can have it give a lot more of that data organically. This seems powerful.
Yeah, from what I was reading, it'll do things like with responsive images, basically provide all of the image URLs for that responsive image so that, there isn't any sort of extra work that has to be done on the front end to sort of, manipulate the paths to get the different sizes and so on.
Got it. That was going to be part of my question, I guess, was like, what does the output look like? Is it just the field data, or is it like bringing in all of the template stuff as well? It sounds like it's just the field data though, right?
It's the field data, but you can also apply transformers, like field level transformers, so that the data can have some level of formatting. So a simple example as a date, as opposed to it, providing, a UTC sort of formatted timestamp the way you would normally see passed in JSON. You could theoretically, if you wanted to, do some of that formatting in the back end so that it gets passed to the front end as something that can just be output.
Got it. Well, that seems to make sense, and I do agree with Nick. This seems very, very useful, especially if you're trying to build some sort of headless site or use your data in multiple places. So cool. Well, Martin, thanks for another wonderful module of the week. If folks wanted to suggest a module or talk more about this module, where could they go about to do that?
So this module was actually nominated by, friend of the show, Matthew Scarset, and that was in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack. So, certainly happy to talk about modules of the week or receive nominations there, but folks can also reach out to me directly as ManClue on all of the Drupal and social channels.
Wonderful.